The night had grown unbearably silent, save for the faint hum of the wind against the window. The room was dim, casting long shadows across the walls. Martin sat at the edge of the bed, his back turned to Emma. His fingers trembled slightly as they intertwined, his thoughts racing faster than he could control. 7 years. 7 long, beautiful, and heartbreaking years. But the last 2 had been filled with despair. Emma lay beside him, staring blankly at the ceiling. The room felt suffocating, her chest heavy with the weight of everything they'd been through. She had dreamed of this life, being married to Martin, their house filled with laughter, and children running through the halls. But those dreams had turned into nightmares of doctors' visits, tests, treatments, and finally, the shattering diagnosis: infertility. They had tried so hard, done everything they could, but it was never enough. Her body had betrayed her. She had betrayed him. They had visited every fertility clinic in the city, consulted specialists, and tried every alternative therapy available. She had taken hormone injections, endured invasive procedures, and even prayed for a miracle. But after each cycle, after each round of hope, came the crushing news: no baby. The emptiness in her womb mirrored the growing emptiness in her heart. I feel like a failure, Emma thought, tears burning the back of her eyes. Though she wouldn't let them fall. Not again. She had cried too many nights, and Martin had comforted her every time. But now, his words felt hollow. The love that had once been their foundation was crumbling, replaced by disappointment and bitterness. Martin spoke, his voice barely a whisper, cutting through the stillness. I can't do this anymore, Emma. Emma's heart lurched painfully in her chest, a mixture of shock and dread washing over her. She didn't need to ask what he meant. She knew. For months now, she had felt him pulling away, his touch becoming colder, his presence feeling more like an obligation than love. Still, hearing the words out loud was like a dagger to her soul. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Martin, what are you saying? He stood from the bed, running his hands through his disheveled hair, pacing the room like a man trapped in a cage. His back was to her, but she could see his shoulders tense, his body rigid with the weight of everything he was about to say. I want a family, Emma. A real family. Kids. You know that's always been important to me. I love you, but... His voice cracked, and he turned to face her, his eyes filled with an emotion that made Emma's blood run cold. Regret. But I'm starting to wonder if love is enough. Her heart shattered. Every word felt like a punch, each one knocking the air from her lungs. Not enough, she whispered, disbelief thick in her voice. She had given him everything, her heart, her soul, and now he was telling her it wasn't enough. Martin sat down on the edge of the bed, his face buried in his hands. I never thought I'd say this, but I don't know how to keep going like this, Emma. Every time I look at you, I see the life we were supposed to have. The kids we were supposed to raise. And it kills me inside. Emma felt a surge of anger rise within her, but it was quickly smothered by sadness. She sat up, her hands trembling. So, what are you saying? You're leaving me? After everything? He looked at her, his eyes pleading for her to understand. I don't want to hurt you, but I'm hurting too. Every day, I wake up and feel like we're just pretending to be okay. I don't know how to move forward without a family. Emma's voice cracked as tears streamed down her face. I am your family, Martin. You and I, we're supposed to be enough. I thought we would be, he whispered, tears now glistening in his own eyes. But we're not. I want more. I need more, Emma sobbed, her heart breaking into pieces she wasn't sure could ever be put back together. She reached for him, but he stepped back, the distance between them growing more than just physical. Please don't leave me. Martin, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Martin shook his head, his eyes closed, as if he couldn't bear to look at her anymore. I don't want to, but I don't see any other way. I'm sorry, Emma. The divorce papers were signed in silence. There were no screaming matches, no angry words exchanged, only the sound of their pens scratching across the paper as they signed away the life they had built together. Emma moved out of the home they had shared, her footsteps echoing in the now empty rooms. Each step felt like a reminder of what she had lost, of what they had lost. Weeks turned into months, and Emma tried to rebuild her life. She threw herself into work, spent her evenings alone, and avoided anything that reminded her of the life she once had with Martin. The thought of him with someone else, someone who could give him the family he so desperately wanted, haunted her. 2 months after the divorce, Emma's body started to feel different. She felt nauseous in the mornings, tired throughout the day, and an overwhelming sense of exhaustion that she couldn't shake. At first, she thought it was just stress, or maybe depression. But when she missed her period, she dared to hope for the impossible. She bought a pregnancy test, her hands trembling as she held it. For years, she had taken these tests, each one bringing disappointment. But this time, something felt different. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and waited. When she opened them, she saw it. The 2 lines. Positive. Emma stared at the test in disbelief, her heart pounding in her chest. This can't be real, she whispered to herself, her voice shaking. But it was. She was pregnant. After years of trying, after being told she couldn't conceive, her body had done the impossible. The first few days after the test were a whirlwind of emotions, joy, confusion, and anger. Why now? Why after everything had fallen apart? She was pregnant with Martin's child. The child they had both wanted so desperately, and yet, he was gone. Should she tell him? Should she keep the baby a secret? What if he didn't want to be a part of her life anymore? What if he had already moved on? Months passed, and Emma's belly grew. She went through the pregnancy alone, deciding to keep the news to herself. Martin had made his choice, and she didn't want to complicate his life. It was her burden to carry, her secret to keep. But with each kick, each flutter of life inside her, Emma found a new strength. This child was hers, and she would do everything she could to protect and love her baby. On a cold December morning, Emma went into labor. Alone in the hospital room, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Lily, after the flower that symbolized rebirth and new beginnings. As she held her daughter for the first time, Emma felt a love so fierce, so powerful, it took her breath away. She had lost Martin, but in Lily, she had gained a new reason to live. 6 years passed. Emma had built a quiet, peaceful life with Lily. She had become a devoted mother, pouring all her love and energy into raising her daughter. Lily was the light of her life, the reason she got up every morning. She had Martin's eyes, his smile, and every time Emma looked at her, she saw him. But she never reached out. Martin had made his choice, and she had made hers. It was a crisp autumn day when everything changed. Emma and Lily were walking through the park, Lily's laughter ringing through the air as she ran ahead, chasing the falling leaves. Emma watched her, a smile on her face, when she suddenly felt a presence nearby. She turned, and her heart stopped, standing a few feet away. Staring at her with wide eyes, was Martin. He looked different, older, more worn, as though the years had not been kind to him. His hair was graying at the temples, and there were lines etched deeply into his face. But it was him. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she was frozen. Martin's gaze wasn't on her, though. It was on Lily. His eyes followed the little girl as she danced around, her giggles filling the air. His face contorted in confusion, disbelief washing over him as he finally looked at Emma. "Emma?" His voice was barely audible, filled with a mixture of shock and something else she couldn't quite place. "Is she?" Emma swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Martin. She's yours." For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, staring at Lily, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then, slowly, he took a step toward her, his face pale, his hands trembling. "She's mine," Emma nodded again, tears welling up in her eyes. "I found out after the divorce," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do. I thought about telling you, but you'd moved on. I didn't want to complicate things." Martin's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Lily, who was now running back toward them, her bright blue eyes, the same as his, shining with joy. "Daddy," she cried, recognizing him from the pictures Emma had shown her over the years. Martin's breath caught in his throat as Lily ran into his arms, wrapping her tiny hands around his neck. He knelt down, holding her close, tears streaming down his face as the reality of it all hit him. His daughter. His child. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees in the park, casting golden streaks on the pavement where Emma stood, frozen in place. Her heart pounded as she watched the man she once loved, still loved, kneeling in front of their daughter. Lily, holding her in his arms as though he were holding a piece of his soul. Martin's hands trembled as he held Lily, his face contorted with overwhelming emotion. His eyes, once cold and distant when they parted, were now wide with disbelief, pain, and love all at once. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he gently stroked Lily's hair, her giggles like music cutting through the deep silence between him and Emma. Emma stood only a few feet away, her hands clasped tightly around her purse, her heart aching with 1,000 emotions. It felt like time had stopped, like the world had collapsed into this one moment where the past, the present, and the future collided. She had imagined this day countless times but never prepared for the raw intensity of seeing Martin look at their daughter for the first time. Martin pulled back slightly, staring into Lily's face, his own a portrait of disbelief and agony. "Daddy," he echoed, his voice barely a whisper as if he were afraid to speak too loudly, afraid that this moment would shatter like fragile glass. She knows who I am." Emma's throat tightened. She had dreaded this day for years, imagining what she would say, how she would explain, but nothing could have prepared her for this. She swallowed hard, her voice soft, barely audible. "I told her about you, Martin. I never hid you from her." Martin stood slowly, Lily still wrapped around his neck, her tiny arms clutching him as if she had known him her whole life. His eyes, swollen with unshed tears, locked onto Emma's. There was pain there, deep pain, but also something else, a glimmer of hope, something he hadn't felt in years. "Emma," he choked, his voice thick with emotion, "why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know I had a daughter?" Emma's breath hitched. The guilt crashing over her in waves. She had asked herself that question every single day for the past 6 years. I didn't know how, she said, her voice shaking. You left, Martin. You wanted a family, and I couldn't give you that, until after you were gone. And by the time I found out I was pregnant, it felt too late. You were moving on, and I didn't want to ruin your life again. Martin's face twisted with pain, and he took a step closer to her, his gaze unwavering. Ruin my life, he said, his voice rising, not with anger, but with the weight of everything left unsaid. Emma, I never moved on. I never stopped thinking about you. Not for one day. I thought I'd lost you forever. That I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And now you're telling me I have a daughter. That I missed 6 years of her life because you thought I didn't care. Emma's tears flowed freely now, the dam breaking as all the emotions she had bottled up for so long poured out. You left me, Martin, she cried, her voice raw, filled with the anguish of their broken past. You left me because I couldn't give you a baby. And when I finally could, when I finally had the one thing we both wanted, I was so angry and hurt, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if you'd even want her, or if you'd hate me for keeping it a secret. Lily, sensing the tension between them, clung tighter to Martin's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Her small voice broke the air. Mommy, why are you sad? Emma bit her lip, her whole body shaking with the force of her suppressed sobs. She knelt down in front of Lily, gently touching her daughter's cheek, forcing a smile even as her heart ached. I'm not sad, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm just so happy you finally met your daddy. Martin's eyes filled with fresh tears as he looked between Emma and Lily. He couldn't fathom what Emma had gone through, raising their daughter alone. He had been so wrapped up in his own grief, his own longing for something he thought he'd never have, that he had walked away from the very life he had always wanted. And now here it was, standing right in front of him, like a cruel twist of fate. I don't hate you, Emma, he whispered, kneeling down beside her. His voice so soft it was barely audible. I could never hate you. I hate myself for leaving. For giving up on us. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. I've been wrong for 6 years. And now, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make up for the time I've lost. Emma's eyes met his, and for the first time in years, she saw the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had promised to love her forever, standing there, broken but real. I don't know if we can fix what's broken, she whispered, echoing the words she had told herself so many times before. There's so much pain, so much history between us. Martin nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I know. But I want to try, Emma. I want to try for her, he said, glancing down at Lily, who was watching them both with wide, curious eyes. And for us. I can't change the past, but I can be here now. I want to be her father. I want to be a part of her life. I want to be a part of your life. Emma closed her eyes, the weight of his words crashing over her like a tidal wave. For 6 years, she had lived with the pain of their separation, with the fear that Martin had moved on, that he had forgotten her, forgotten what they once shared. But now, standing here with their daughter between them, she realized that maybe, just maybe, life was giving them a second chance. She looked up at Martin, her eyes filled with tears, and slowly nodded. Okay, she whispered. But it's not going to be easy. Martin reached out, gently taking her hand in his. His grip was warm, strong, the way it used to be. "I know," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm not going anywhere this time. I'll be here. For both of you." Lily looked up at them, her eyes shining with excitement. "Does this mean Daddy's coming home with us?" she asked, her innocent voice breaking through the tension like a ray of sunlight. Emma and Martin exchanged a glance, both of them smiling through their tears. "Not yet, sweetheart," Emma said softly, brushing a lock of Lily's hair behind her ear. "But we'll see him a lot more now. We'll figure it out." Martin stood, lifting Lily into his arms, holding her close as though he never wanted to let her go. His heart swelled with love, a love he never thought he'd feel, a love he had buried deep within himself for so long. He had been lost, but now he had found his way back, to his daughter, to Emma, and to the family he had always wanted. As they began to walk out of the park together, the sun setting in the distance, casting a golden glow over the horizon, Emma felt a glimmer of hope spark inside her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and the wounds of their past wouldn't heal overnight, but maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild what was lost. Maybe they could find a new way forward. As a family, and as Martin held Lily's hand in one of his, and Emma's in the other, for the first time in years, he felt whole. He felt at home. Life had given them a second chance. And this time, he wouldn't let go. Months had passed since that fateful day in the park. Slowly, with time and patience, Martin and Emma began to rebuild their relationship, not just as co-parents but as the people they had once loved. There were hard conversations, moments of doubt, and times when they both wondered if the damage was too deep to repair. But every time Martin looked at Lily, at her bright eyes filled with trust and hope, he knew he had to keep trying. One night, as they sat together in the living room of Emma's apartment, Lily asleep in her bed, Martin turned to Emma, his voice soft and filled with emotion. "I've missed this. I've missed us," Emma smiled, her heart aching with the bittersweet memories of their past. "I've missed us too," and in that moment, as they sat together, the weight of the past slowly lifted, and the possibility of a new future unfolded before them, one filled with love, forgiveness, and the family they had always dreamed of.